The new 107.1 The Boss, classic rock of the 70s, 80s, and more. Ian Anderson is celebrating 50 years of Jethro Tull and celebrating with a pair of shows in New Jersey. March 9th at the Ocean Resort Casino, Ovation Hall in Atlantic City, and March 12th at the Mayo Performing Arts Center in Morristown, New Jersey. This tour, he's got Dave Goodyear on bass, John O'Hara on keyboards, Florian O'Fale on guitar, and Scott Hammond on drums, plus surprise virtual guests. Can't wait to see what that's all about. We got into it quite quickly with our interview, and he decided to start talking about his opinions on Bohemian Rhapsody and the Oscars. What did he think of the movies? This is what he had to say.
In this year, in all the movie awards, we seem to have actors who don't act. They're just imitators. They're just pretending to be Freddie Mercury or pretending to be whoever it might be, Donald Rumsfeld or whoever is the object of their desire. And although they may do it very well, it's not actually very original. And so I'm not one who enjoys too much in the way of following what other people have done and trying to maybe just put a little spin on it. I think the people have always appealed to me most as musicians, songwriters, actors, is those who really strike out and do something quite different they break the mold. That's kind of an important thing. But then you have a president currently who's done just that, and it isn't necessarily always a good thing.
So to be clear, you didn't enjoy Bohemian Rhapsody.
Well, I thought it was quite well done, but it's always no. I honestly didn't really enjoy it. I did watch it dutifully because I felt that I should, because so many people thought it was great. But I think what they're drawn by really is the respect and the enormous pleasure that Freddie Mercury and Queen have given to the world, and that in that way, I suppose it was. It was quite good, and when I watched the movie Vice, I thought that was quite a good movie too. But at the end of it all, there's that feeling of something a little bit hollow, that you'd be just watching an impersonation. And same thing with the Laurel and Hardy movie. Great performances, but it's just impersonation, and that's a bit like all those talent shows where endless wannabe singers get on and try to sing like Aretha Franklin or whoever it might be that they're imitating really, and it's a bit tiresome. I kind of like those wacky people who nobody else can do what they do, like Frank Zappa or Captain Beefheart or in a way, even the Beatles, they were kind of hard to imitate.
Absolutely, but I think you're hard to imitate. I still have not seen anybody stand on one foot playing the flute.
No, but Michael Jackson did have a go at the comp piece. He did borrow that little element of my stage persona, and it's nice to know that he probably had no idea who I was or the music, but I'm sure somebody whispered in his ear, "You do realize, Michael, that Ian Anderson did that 20 years ago." So who knows?
Well, here we are celebrating 50 years of Tull, and you're going to be bringing the show to the Ocean Resort Casino's Ovation Hall on the 9th. We're getting double the Ian this month in New Jersey because you're coming to the Mayo Performing Arts Center in Morristown on March 12th and sold out. Unbelievable.
Well, it's only a little theatre, so we would hope that it would be, but it's also an area that we haven't played too often in before. I mean, we were in Philadelphia during the course of last year, and of course in Washington, so there are places that we're kind of, venturing into similar geographical territory. So there are those who may have seen the show last year who have an opportunity to come and see it again, or those who didn't, who will see it for the first time. But it is very much a celebration of the early part of Jethro Tull. Not entirely, but focusing more on the first 10 years when Jethro Tull got out and about around the world and became, internationally speaking, sort of fairly well known. And so it's following the, not 100% chronologically, but it does particularly establish the early part of Jethro Tull's beginnings at the Marquee Club in London and on through our expansion to theatres and arenas and things elsewhere in the world. So it's a nostalgic look, but we try and set it very much in the context of the times and the culture of the day in terms of the video accompaniment and, of course, some special guests who pop up and introduce a song and say hello.
Now, it's interesting you bring up the Marquis Show. That was 1968. Those of us in the States were actually introduced to Tull with the touring in 69. So it makes sense that the 50th anniversary is going through 2019.
Yes, it is in that sense. From a touring perspective, it is the 50th anniversary in the U.S. But for me, it's the 51st anniversary. I've been. We started this tour last April, and in fact, it goes pretty much on through the end of this year. We're still doing the 50th anniversary production tour, but we also play other kinds of concerts too, and which are just generic shows in various outdoor places, and of course the Christmas concerts where I do fundraisers for our great medieval cathedrals in the UK and quite often in one or two churches elsewhere in Europe. So it's we get to stretch out a little bit and do different things different times of the year. It's not just repetitive, the same show every night, week after week.
I know you probably get so tired of telling the story, but there are some people that probably don't know that you picked up the flute when you figured that was the best way to differentiate yourself from the musicians of the times, which is goes back again to you talking about people finding originality. And that's a lesson that I think should be taught in music schools about finding your own voice and finding your own instrument and making your own way.
Yes, I think indeed that's part of the enjoyment of listening to music and being challenged by something perhaps beyond your comfort zone. But young flute players, for example, who learn by playing classical music and read music and are taught to perform very much in a very defined way, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And in many ways, I rather regret that I never had that kind of instruction or education. I just picked it up and trying to figure out for myself how to play it and what I could do with it. But by the same token, I think, yes, it's a good idea that as a young musician, you get introduced to other forms of music, and on your chosen instrument, you're able to perhaps learn some of the elements of improvisation and in terms of musical styling, to stretch out and draw from and learn from other kinds of music. But having said that, most of the time, do what your teacher tells you. It's usually with a good reason. But, you can, I think, become a much more rounded and whole person as well as a whole musician by being open to other influences and other musical cultures and styles.
Now, what's cool about this tour is the tracks that you're going to be performing. Like some songs, I believe, are considered deep in the catalog, Crest of a Knave, and maybe a few other songs. Like I said, Thick as a Brick for me is always something I enjoy watching you perform on guitar.
Well, yeah, a little bit of that sneaks in as well. But we've got a lot of ground to cover in
50
in
years,
2 hours on stage, and so it is. I mean, generally speaking, we're not trying to be too obscure. Most of the music we play is, I think, either fairly well known to most of the audience, or it is in the style of well-known Jethro Tull music. So there's nothing that's going to strain them too far in the sense of being weird or wacky or unusual. But by the same token, some people would consider most of what I've written and recorded as being wacky, weird, and unusual. So I'm probably right on target.
Songs that I personally love have in my Spotify list on repeat. Locomotive Breath. I always loved the chugga chugga chugga, the way that sounds, that musically. How did you come up with such a driving cool song?
Well, it was one of, I think, 3 songs on the Aqualung album that I wrote when I was on tour in the USA, sitting in a hotel room somewhere and strumming an acoustic guitar, which is the genesis of most of what I've written. And with that particular one, it was just a simple repeating motif, 3 chords, and one of those little moments when you had to do something with an instrument, knowing that wasn't going to be the way that the record was going to go. It was Aqualung and Locomotive Breath, both kind of fairly full-on rock songs, but they were written with the acoustic guitar. So as a songwriter and as a record producer, I have to use my imagination and say, well, these are the notes. This is the sound of the melody or the chords, and then I have to extrapolate that into how it's going to be when it's played with a Gibson Les Paul guitar through a 200-watt stack of Marshalls. It's you have to put your mind somewhere else in another parallel universe almost when it comes to realizing that for the final recording master. And you have to enthuse your musicians too. I mean, to this day, I was just listening the other day to some demos that I'd made months and months ago for the guys in the band, where I'm just playing the acoustic guitar and singing very quietly, just to give them an idea of the elements of a song. But of course, that's not the way the songs turned out when we recorded them. They're rock songs, and I, as well as the other musicians, have to be able to take those elements and put them in this other place, where you make it stylistically. You put it in a different context. But that's the great joy of music. Music can be done in many different ways. Same melody, same harmony, same rhythm, but yet you can turn it into something perhaps in 3 or 4 or 5 different ways if you choose to do it.
What is one of the tracks that you wrote that you were most surprised when it became a hit?
Well, probably the one that was done almost a bit tongue-in-cheek was in 1969 when we were on our first U.S. tour. I think we were in Boston, staying in a hotel out of town near the river, and we were our manager said at the time, well, we're going to be away from the UK for nearly 3 months. We should try and find something to record and release to keep as he put it, keep the pot boiling while we're away from the UK. So he said, can you write a single, write a hit single, and we'll arrange for a recording session. So I said, sure, just give me an hour. I'll meet you in the lobby in an hour. I'll write a hit single. I was just kidding. I was just joking, just winding him up.
No pressure. Just write a hit single.
I went upstairs to my room and wrote a piece of music and some words, and came back down and said, yeah, I've got it. So we booked a recording session a week later in New York, actually in New Jersey, and we recorded the backing track there. I think I did the vocals in San Francisco a couple of weeks later, and we sent the tape back to England, and it was released. And because it was in 5/4 time signature, it wasn't something that was very obvious. It also had a title that was distinctly uncool, untrendy. It was called Living in the Past. But lo and behold, it was released in the UK and got to number 3 in the singles charts. And a couple of years later, it finally was released in the USA. Because originally Warner Brothers felt that this was definitely not a hit single, but sooner or later they thought, well, maybe we'll give it a go. And of course, it got very respectable placing as an AM radio hit in the USA too. So sometimes, against the odds, you come up with something which isn't necessarily very commercial, but somehow it just hits that spot with people and becomes a quirky, unusual pop hit. But I'm very pleased that I've written 2 or 3 of those over the years. It's nice to be able to do.
I would like to think New Jersey was your good luck charm on that one.
Yeah, well, there's quite a lot of Jethro Tull around the whole New Jersey area is something that goes back right to the very earliest days when we toured America, and it's a much underrated state. I've always found when my wife and I usually drive, you see, in a rental car around wherever we're going, and we both have a very fond idea of what New Jersey is once you get away from the obvious urban centers. And of course, some of the wonderful, nicest little family-run Italian restaurants that I've ever been to have been in New Jersey.
So our rolling hills must remind you of home in Scotland. I'm kidding.
Well, in some ways they do, and the countryside and the wooded, hinterland of New Jersey is a paradise for walkers and hunters. A great place to go and get out into the outdoors. It isn't all Atlantic City or the Atlantic shore.
Now, in celebration of the 50 years of Tull, there's a lot more coming this year. There will be the Stephen Wilson remix and remastered Stormwatch with the 40th anniversary of those sessions. There's going to be extra material from those sessions and some live tracks, too, I understand?
Yeah, weirdly, there was a whole bunch of stuff that I absolutely really didn't know existed, that were either outtakes or songs, entire songs, and certainly versions of songs, which I had no idea were still on tape somewhere. And the busy boys at Warner's in the UK, who have the rights to the catalogue, they went through and found all this stuff the tapes that used to be in the EMI tape store at Abbey Road, and finally uncovered all this other material. So yes, a huge wealth of music that is was recorded around the same period of the few months around the Stormwatch album, and just it wasn't the 10 or 12 tracks that appeared on the final album. It's all the other stuff, and of course there's some live music as well. And it's a very good collector's edition of all that period of time of Jethro Tull. And hats off to the record company that these days they make that effort to do this for the fans, because frankly, if you can release something that's actually going to make a small profit, then you do it. Whereas 20 years ago, they couldn't be bothered. Back then, the idea of box sets and special editions for fans, that wasn't on the radar. They were only interested in signing the new mega hit group. These days, they've got real. They know that the record industry is a tough place to be trying to make a living in, so you do anything that has a potential profit margin, and that means serving the fans. It's a win-win for everybody, really. Makes them a bit of money, and for the fans of not just Jethro Tull but other bands of that ilk, then there are all these goodies that are now being made available.
Especially with Record Store Day coming up in April. Do you ever partake in Record Store Day?
Yeah, I think we have the same sort of thing here, which is it's an interesting phenomenon that people do, I suppose, have that, in some ways, a nostalgic look at that era, but also a lot of younger people who find great joy in collecting physical copies of music as opposed to just hearing it on Spotify or downloading a digital file.
It's also really cool. I always say at this time of year that it's time to start lining up our beach reads. And there's a 50th anniversary Jethro Tull book coming. And I know there's other Tull books out there, but what is going to be so different about this one coming out?
Well, it is an authorized book, and if you like, I am the editor, and the writer has spent a lot of time interviewing me and other members of the band, and so it is I'm hoping, I haven't actually seen the final draft yet, but I'm hoping that with all the pictorial material and everything that goes into it, it will be a definitive biography of Jethro Tull, the band, and there's not much in the way of sex, drugs, and rock and roll about it, because we are a very boring and tame and ordinary bunch of guys, all 36 members of Jethro Tull, that we've all been rather sober and normal people. But I think the whole musical story is what it's about, and I'm afraid there's no tales of wild parties of. I think maybe I might have made reference to the fact that I did once go to a Led Zeppelin roadies party in a hotel somewhere in America and had a couple of beers and quietly left. But that's about as close as I've been to the scary world of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But it was close enough.
Did those roadies party as hardy as the band?
Well, it was always euphemistically talked about as a roadies party, but of course it was just an excuse to, I suppose, take the attention away from the band who would go to these things. But I can fondly remember Jimmy Page showing me, in the year that the Polaroid camera came to visit us from the inventive side of, I think it was Kodak who did that originally, but they made the film. But it was Jimmy had a Polaroid camera and would fondly show us the pictures that he'd taken the night before, and which I seem to recall were rather exotic photos of one sort or another. But he was obviously a very cheerful, happy lad, having a good time being a rock and roll star.
Now, with that in mind, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they're going to induct a new class coming up in March with Def Leppard and The Cure and Roxy Music. What are your thoughts on the hall?
Well, I don't really have much thought about it. It is for me. It's about celebrating American music of I suppose 60 years or something. To me, it's the American Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It should be about Americana, and I don't think Jethro Tull really kind of fit into that. So I think when the museum opened in Cleveland, we were one of the first people to have some stuff on show. I know because I went to visit it back then. And, I remember being in a glass cabinet, or at least my clothes were, next to Rod Stewart. And I remember looking at it and thinking, God, we look like we're about, 4 foot tall. We looked like midgets, the tiny little people, the little skinny little guys with these tiny little clothes. And I figured out maybe it wasn't quite as bad as that. Maybe they just used the wrong dry cleaner when they sent the clothes out to be cleaned before they put them in a glass cabinet. But it's fine. It's fine. But I don't think Jethro Tull belong in that sort of in environment. Really, I'm not. I think there are many other people that should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame long before Jethro Tull. They'd have to be rooting around the bottom drawer looking for names before they ask us.
Well, when you're in Atlantic City, take a walk over to the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino and check out all the memorabilia there. They just opened last summer. They got some cool things in there.
Yeah, well, I think I'd prefer the British Museum, but I know what you mean.
I'm acting as your tour guide. Thank you, Ian. Thank you so much for calling and checking in on the new 107.1 The Boss. Remember, 50 years of Toll, March 9th, Ocean Resort Casino, Ovation Hall in Atlantic City, and the Mayo Performing Arts Center, Morristown. That, of course, sold out, but maybe we can grab a couple of tickets on StubHub. I did not just say that. March 12th.
All righty. See you all there very soon. Bye-bye now.
Bye. Thank you. Ian Anderson and Jethro Tull, thank you so much for joining us on the new 107.1 The Boss.